the B'nai B'rith International podcast. I'm CEO Dan Mariaschin. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm joined today by Eduardo Kohn, B'nai B'rith's Director of Latin American Affairs. Today, Eduardo and I will be discussing the 49th General Assembly of the Organization of American States, or the OAS. The OAS is the world's oldest regional organization. It dates back to 1889. 35 member states. Their headquarters is right here in Washington, D.C. This annual meeting will take place from June 26 to 28 in Medellin, Colombia. Each year, the meeting moves to a different country. Eduardo and our colleague Sienna Girgenti, Program Director for Strategic Engagement, will represent B'nai B'rith at the meeting. In this discussion, we'll be talking about why B'nai B'rith attends the OAS General Assembly each year and what we hope the General Assembly will accomplish. We'll also be discussing the situation that Jewish communities face in Latin America today, including the biggest dangers for Jewish communities in the region and the influence of Iran in the Western Hemisphere. Eduardo, thank you for being on the program today.
My pleasure.
Well, I think we should talk first about the OAS. B'nai B'rith, I think, was the first Jewish organization to receive NGO, non-governmental organization status, and that's about 20 years ago. So we go every year to this annual meeting. Why do we go?
Well, NGOs plays a key role in the Organization of American States in the last 3 decades. Yes, you're right. B'nai B'rith was the first Jewish organization to get that status. There was a former Secretary General, José Miguel Insulza from Chile, who was in office for 10 years, who upgraded the importance of civil society. And NGOs have had since then the opportunity to work during the year and not only during the General Assembly. A big example of that has been the approval a couple of years ago of the Inter-American Convention Against Racism and Discrimination, which was precisely proposed by civil society, especially B'nai B'rith, working with other organizations. It took a long time, but it was finally accepted and endorsed. But without the ongoing pushing of NGOs, it would not have happened. So B'nai B'rith is there to defend and activate our principles on combating antisemitism and all forms of discrimination and combating the violations of human rights in any country that may occur.
Now,
in this precise time, this year, we are working together with coalitions of NGOs, and the goal is to get results from the General Assembly and the states one by one, recognizing first that there is a real humanitarian tragedy in Venezuela violating human rights, and that we must, as NGOs, and try to help to, not to solve, but at least to help solving the humanitarian catastrophe that is creating problems to all the region. And an example is that we must be very clear, and we will expose that in our meetings with the Secretary General and with other dignitaries, that Venezuela is heaven for terrorism. Once Hezbollah has members spread all over Venezuela, thing that has been said by the Secretary General Almagro last week publicly.
And speaking of the Secretary General, something very important happened at the OAS just days ago, before this meeting. The OAS has adopted the working definition of antisemitism, which came out of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, known as IRA, which is a consortium of countries that have Holocaust education and remembrance programs in their countries. Tell us about that. How did that happen, and how important is that?
Well, it is very clear that Secretary General Almagro has been approached by organizations like B'nai B'rith in these almost 4 years of his mandate. And we have spoken very clearly that anti-Semitism is a real, clear and present danger in Latin America, not only historically because it happened 25 years ago, the AMIA bombing, but today, not only in social media, but there are facts. I mean, there are incidents, there are people that are being hurt, like in Argentina in the last 2 or 3 months, etc. And we have been asking again and again to the Secretary General that anti-Semitism should be something that should be underlined, especially as a special form of discrimination. And it's very good that he has decided to endorse this definition, because it gives all of us a great opportunity. The decision legally, juridically, it's very important, because it's not the Secretary General, but the General Secretariat of OAS that has adopted this resolution. It's an invitation, and more than an invitation to all state members to endorse and to sign this definition. Nicaragua did it immediately, and Argentina is inside, because Argentina is a member of the AIRA. It's the only Latin American full member of the AIRA from the beginning. So this has started. We will have the opportunity in this meeting next week in Medellin, in Colombia, in the General Assembly, to keep talking with all the countries to try to push them to sign it very quickly. Because in this moment, if OAS has to say what is anti-Semitism, the Secretary General will say this definition. And he is giving all of us and the states the opportunity to endorse that and to expose those who are not ready to do that.
So you have at this meeting, most countries are represented by foreign ministers. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there is
delegations are foreign ministers.
Right, and there's an opportunity to meet with the ministers on the sidelines of the plenary to engage in a discussion about these issues.
Absolutely, it's going. For us, it's the main issue to discuss. There are other issues, but the main issue is this one, because it's the opportunity. The Secretary General has adopted this resolution last week, so it's the moment. And yes, we will have these meetings. Some are already scheduled. Even with the Secretary General, we are going to meet immediately on our arrival. And we will ask his team to help all of us to push the decision of the states, because we also want to be clear which are going to be the countries that are not going to endorse this definition, and that is very important too, because this is a crucial issue. Who is going to endorse something so? As we say, it's not elemental, but it's basic. That is the definition of anti-Semitism in a moment that there is a raising of anti-Semitism, and who is not ready to take the AIRA definition.
So we have in Latin America, we have larger Jewish communities, Argentina being the largest. And in some countries, in Central America, for example, there are communities of only a few dozen families. So this is really something I know that is extremely important at a time of rising anti-Semitism everywhere.
Yes, because we have to think about this. 28 countries are part of the AIRA. 28 countries from Europe and United States, Canada, Israel, and Argentina. 32, I'm sorry. So many other European countries have adopted this definition of anti-Semitism, and when they face the questions of anti-Semitism, they use this definition and all what it takes in question of Israel and the comparisons with Nazi, etc. We know all the definition. In this moment, you said there are 35 countries in OAS. Only 2 have adopted the resolution, one Argentina because a member of the AIRA, and Nicaragua last week. So if we have another 30 countries, we hope, but another 30 countries taking this definition, it's going to be something taken worldwide. And we have another important tool to face the question of anti-Semitism, because there are laws in Latin America and certain countries to combat anti-Semitism, but in the moment there is a rising. There is a rising in social media, and as I told, there is a rising in incidents, in personal incidents, in Argentina, in Chile, etc. So we need this tool, and we are going to work hard to get that they adopt this decision.
So Eduardo, this meeting in Colombia really is coming against the backdrop of the 25th anniversary of the bombing, the terrorist attack on the AMIA building in Buenos Aires, which occurred in July of 1994. Tell us about that incident, which was the most horrific terrorist incident in Latin America. And all of the difficulties and struggles we've had since then to bring justice for the victims of that bombing.
Well, yes, it's difficult to believe, but it's 25 years, as you said, that the AMIA building and the people were bombed in 1994, 2 years before the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires was also bombed. But the AMIA bombing, 25 years, it's something that is very difficult to face 25 years after, because the perpetrators, which were demonstrated by Nisman, who was the attorney and also died, unfortunately. So Nisman accused the Iranians and Hezbollah to be behind these attacks. And he also named in the accusation 8 Iranians who are now in Iran, watching that justice was not served. And it's very difficult that 25 years after, there will be all kind of gatherings, but there will be an important gathering in Buenos Aires, of course, at that time. And unfortunately, the families of the victims and the people in general will be mourning, and justice has not been served when more than, 85 people were killed. If we took together with the Israeli embassy bombing, we are talking about more than 100, which is practically the largest terrorist attack after the World War II. And it happened, when it happened 25 years ago, was something that the world was not used to, that violence, terror, etc. So the feeling that, of course, we have as a Jewish organization, we have made all our efforts with governments of Argentina and other governments to try to that justice was served. What we can say today is that after 25 years, only this last government of Argentina, the government of President Macri, has taken this as serious as possible after 25 years. And knowing that it's very difficult to take perpetrators who live in Iran to justice, to bring them to justice, have tried to sue the local connection. There are some secondary people, but also accomplices and associates to the crime who are in jail, but this is not enough. But what is enough is what is good is that the government has taken the commitment to try to find out and to finalize, at least with a resolution about the perpetrators, and we hope also about the death of prosecutor Nisman. But it's a very sad date, to gather 25 years after a terrorific bombing, who demonstrated how far can anti-Semitism could go in any part of the world without having the perpetrators in jail.
Right, but it also spoke to the Iranian, the priority that Iran placed on terrorist activity and supporting terrorist activity, because, at the same time that this was happening in Buenos Aires, we also had the bombing of the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, where American servicemen were killed, and a whole range of other terrorist activities. So it speaks to the Iranian regime and its support for terror. What do you think? This is now 25 years on. What do you think the prospects are over the next year or so for there to be some kind of closure in this case?
Well, first of all, there was something very important that the Secretary General of OAS, Luis Almagro, said last week, besides the question of anti-Semitism. For the first time in history, Secretary General of OAS, it's not only the question that this is the Secretary General of an international organization. He's the Secretary General of, as you said, the oldest international organization, but it's the organization of the states of all the Americas. It's the first time that somebody like the Secretary General denounced publicly that terrorism is a danger in Latin America, and he accused with names Hezbollah and Iran as the sponsor. So, having said that, it's very important that the OAS, as the maximum international organization in the Americas, the Secretary General, has said something that we have spoken all the time in these 25 years. But this time, it is endorsed very seriously by somebody who is not living in Argentina, with an Argentinian government, is over that. So the hope that we have in the next year or so is that not the trial, but the process of the AMIA have at least make a conclusion about the perpetrators. Now that there is endorsement from all sides, even from OAS, that there were the Iranians. We don't think that justice will be served, because the Iranians will not get out from Iran to any trial. And we also expect firmly that the process about what happened with prosecutor Alberto Nisman about his death, that yes, will be really finalized, and the family can have a response, an answer, and Nisman can rest in peace.
Talk about the countries in Latin America and their bilateral relations with the United States and with Israel. Let's talk about Israel for a minute. A number of Latin American countries were at the UN at the time of the partition plan, voting for partition. How would you say the state of relations is today between those countries and Israel, and also with the United States?
Well, the relationship has been moving in many sides in the last at least 10, 15 years. If we were talking the same thing 5 years ago, it would be different than today. But we are speaking about today. In this moment, for example, for the first time in more than 20 or 25 years, Brazil is having relations with the United States and with Israel, as it had in the moment of the partition. I mean, a real friend of Israel, not a real friend only in social or economic relationship, which is very good, but only in what it matters in this moment, in politically speaking, in the UN. I mean, Brazil is in this moment voting not for Israel, is voting not endorsing the continuous demonization of Israel, and it is very important. And it's a big change, because Brazil haven't done that in the last, 25, 30 or more years, which is really a big switch, and it comes back to the partition. And Brazil is the largest country in all Latin America. Argentina also have moved. I mean, Argentina in the last, about 10 or 12 or 15 years, the position in UN was ambiguous with Israel. In this moment, with the government of President Macri, in the last 3 years of the government of President Macri, 3 years and a half, more or less, it has switched too. I mean, Israel has not had from Argentina the demonization that had before. And the same behavior we can talk about Colombia, about countries of Central America like Panama and Costa Rica. But in general, we have to say that if we speak on the economic relationship with the United States and with Israel, on that hand, the relationship is business, and it goes as the best they can. And in some countries it's very good, in some countries are good, in some countries are better, and in some countries are worse. Politically, I think we have to make a difference just to finalize the answer. With Israel, the good relationship is, as I said, with the countries I mentioned, and there is something that we didn't have in the time of the partition, is the continuous hatred from the government of Venezuela, from the time of Chavez, we are talking about more than 15 years, the continuous hatred, incitation, and demonization of Israel from the government of Venezuela against Israel. This is something we never knew before in Latin America, from the government, not from political parties or academia. No, this is from a government. And this is a big change, very sad, but a big change. The same happened with Cuba, but Cuba is not in this moment. It's a member of the OAS, but it's not attending the OAS. In the question of United States is different. I think that the relationship of the countries with politically with the United States, they try to have a good level of relationship. But of course, we have to take out of that relationship Venezuela, probably Bolivia, who is endorsing everything that Venezuela is doing, and of course Cuba. But the others try to have a good approach. Not always they can, because of course there are countries who are, all the countries that follow the Venezuela regime, the Venezuela dictatorship, of course, are countries which are not friends of the United States and either Israel.
You know, the one point that we certainly want to mention in that discussion about the relations between Latin American countries and Israel is Guatemala's very important gesture in moving its embassy to Jerusalem. The relationship with Honduras, for example. I mean, these are all very important building blocks in establishing a solid relationship that much of which is really based on those early votes back in 1947, wouldn't you say?
Yes, for Guatemala, no doubt. For Guatemala, no doubt, because Guatemala was crucial in the partition, and Garcia Granados was the diplomat who was crucial in that voting. And it's really very good that Guatemala has moved the embassy to Jerusalem following the United States. It's true that Honduras it's really close to Israel. I think that Central America is doing better than several countries in South America, but it depends on the government on the time. I mean, I'm here in Uruguay. Uruguay has good relations with Israel in general, but of course, in the last 15 years or 13 years at least, the relationship in question of UN record voting has been very bad, not good, let's say, if you want. But the economic relations are good, but it's different than from Guatemala, for example. And Uruguay and Guatemala and Paraguay and Brazil were crucial in the partition. So it depends, of course, on the governments, but I don't envision big changes as what I said. I mean, I think that Central America has a better relationship, and also with the United States, than several countries in South America, because in South America we have countries like, as I said, Venezuela and Bolivia, which are really hostile with the United States and with Israel.
Just to go back to the OAS before we close, Eduardo, you'll be there with a number of other NGOs. Tell us about the value of, clearly the value of being there and meeting with the diplomats is something extremely important. But you have NGOs from a wide range of corners of the civil society. What's the value of being there and having those corridor conversations and meetings over coffee with the other NGOs?
Well, we are talking, just for the people to understand, we are talking about more than 300 NGOs attending this meeting. There could be more, but there's no space for more. But we are talking about 300. Most of the 300, of course, there are some with more well-known names than others, but most of them, what they try to do, the civil society, is the question of human rights, because human rights are really in danger all around Latin America. And I'm talking about all kind of discrimination, the question of indigenous people, the question of gender, etc., and of course anti-Semitism. But it's a crucial issue. And what NGOs get talking, as you say, not only in sidelines, we have official conversations as a group, we have official conversations with the chiefs of delegations. There are a couple of meetings, two meetings of 2 or 3 hours each, when the civil society pose on the table this question and pushes for decisions of the Organization of American States. I am sure that this time again, there will be resolutions about what is happening, especially in Venezuela, also in Nicaragua, in question of human rights, and very likely in the electoral process in Bolivia, question all of human rights. I am sure there will be proposals from the civil society that will be endorsed in the General Assembly by the states, because civil society is the one that pushes in general these kind of issues, showing that there is a group of people, a very important group of population in those countries that are demanding resolutions. The other important thing is to know what the Secretary General and the team is doing. It's very important to be there in the sidelines with the foreign ministers and with the delegations, because this Secretary General has been very important in the decisions that have been taken in the question of Venezuela. And we put a very important example. In this moment, the ambassador of Venezuela before OAS is not a member of Maduro's government. It is a member of Guaido's government. I mean, the provisional president, let's say the president of the General Assembly, because the OAS have not, the majority is not recognizing the legality, that the government of Maduro is legal. So what is happening in the General Assembly, that we will be talking with representatives of the government of Guaido, not with the government of Maduro. And the government of Maduro and the people of the government of Maduro will not be in the General Assembly, because Colombia, which is the host country, is not recognizing the government either. So we expect very tough resolutions in the question of violation of human rights and humanitarian situation, but this is a big change. And in that change, the civil society will play a key role, and we hope to help that the key role is being well played.
Yeah, I can't think of another multilateral organization that opens itself up as much to civil society, literally on the ground, as does the OAS. So we certainly wish you and Sienna well as you go off to Colombia for this meeting. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to our podcast. This is a special program today. It's our 50th podcast, and we want to thank all of our guests and all of our listeners, not to mention our colleagues who helped to put this program together. Please visit our website, b'nai like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, subscribe on your smartphone through the podcast app for iPhone or through Google Play for Android. And lastly, be sure to tell a friend about us. For my guest, Eduardo Kohn, who joined us today from Montevideo, Uruguay, I'm Dan Mariaschin. We'll talk to you next time on the B'nai B'rith International Podcast.